Hey guys, I'm Megan.
And I'm Stephanie, and we are
Barn Besties
with
Farm Fresh advice
for you. So we are here to impart the knowledge that we have learned over the years of building and running barns so that you guys don't have to have the problems and the misery and the mistakes that we made. Hope you enjoy our videos. Make sure you hit the subscribe button, right?
Right, and we hope to save you time and money on your new adventures.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Megan.
And I'm Stephanie, and we are
Barn Besties
with
Farm Fresh Advice.
So we're here today with Karen. This is part 2. We are talking about Karen is a working student with Miss Megan's barn. If you've not checked out part 1, please make sure you get a chance to do that. We had a lot of good things we've covered. So this is part 2, and Megan, I think you had some pretty good questions you had in mind for part 2. So take it away, Miss Megan.
All right, we have so much to talk about. So Karen, tell us about management. And
What do you mean?
That factor. So in running a barn, I manage the barn, but I
Yes.
also delegate. And part of the working student experience.
What? You delegate?
I delegate people.
You don't micromanage?
I don't I am a control freak just like everybody else. However, I have learned to delegate after 25 years. And part of that, I think what's really important with the working student position is I believe after your time here that you can run off and run a barn. If you wanted to own a barn, if you wanted to get a job as a barn manager, my goal, and I feel it's my responsibility with my working students, is that they have the capability, they have the confidence within themselves to go off and do all these things. And so I also require you to help me manage the barn. So talk to us about that, because it's managing horses. Also, I leave for 3 months, so it's imperative you can run a barn. And we have clients. And do I give you insight on how I run a barn, but do I also allow you to develop your own skills?
Yes, you definitely do. I would say in the beginning, I was really much more just, sort of that student, right? You had to teach me how you ran the barn. And the management...
Did you like that?
I did like that because like I said, I hadn't, seriously worked in a barn. I didn't necessarily know what needed to be done. And so even things like I said in my afternoon, I'll do tasks in the beginning. Megan sort of would write a list of stuff she wanted me to do. And then slowly it was sort of what do you think you should do this afternoon? And becoming aware, what does need to be done on the farm? When do these things need to happen? When do water tanks need to be cleaned or filled? When do these horses need to have XYZ? When is the vet coming?
When do we call for hay and shavings and grain? And
yeah, when are we getting low on certain stuff? And so I would say in the beginning she told me, and then she started asking me questions, and then I started just telling her when we started to get low on stuff. And then after starting sort of between our relationship and learning how to manage myself, it then became I started having to manage more of the clients. And that's a really interesting thing. Even little things, like you said, I'm a working student. How I introduce myself to people really impacts how people treat me in the barn.
Yes.
Like if I'm giving a tour and I say I'm a working student versus if I say I'm an instructor versus if I say I'm the barn manager, those get 3 very different levels of respect.
So let's delve into that. Okay, you said working. Let's start with working student. What level of respect does that give you? Are they not nice to you, or are they nice to you? Or what?
I would say they don't think they have to listen to me.
Okay. So what about barn manager?
And I want to interrupt on that.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
I would also say, depending on the client, they were rude to you. I think that's really important for our clientele to understand, and I think other working students, you're treated differently. And also, Karen and I work as a team. I'm mom, she's dad. And it's been interesting to work through that together. And understand they communicate differently with her, and we've had very honest conversations. Go ahead.
Yeah, that is really fascinating. I'm not, I would say I'm maybe a little too nice in certain cases,
Yes.
and Megan isn't afraid to kind of put the foot down, and that leads to things where people just full on tell us 2 different stories.
Yes.
And then I'll sort of tell her, I'm like, the client told me this, and she's like, well, they told me that. And people just treat us very differently, even though our goal here really is just to create a really wonderful place for people to come ride. And on the note that you asked, I would say it's like working student and then instructor and then barn manager kind of gets the most respect. And when I give tours, I've just started, if I'm going to teach the person, I've started introducing myself just as their instructor. And when I'm not going to teach, like I'm giving a tour for Megan or something, sometimes I'll just say her assistant or barn manager, because if I just say I'm the working student, I can see them just like looking around the barn and not looking at my face.
Sure. Yep. And I think that's probably a social perception overall versus
Yeah. And they're all
anything
the
to
same
do
thing.
personally with you.
Yeah, they are the same thing.
Perceptions of titles.
Here, in my particular job
Yeah.
here, they're all the same, like they're all parts of my job that encompass regardless of the title.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing that's important to understand is Karen is taking care of the horses. So, and I think it's very important in our industry that people treat all of the help. It doesn't matter who you are, the working student, the instructor, the barn owner, the stall cleaner, they should all be treated
Any
the same,
staff, yeah.
because they are supporting, whether it's your hobby, whether it's your dream. I think it's very important to discuss that, and then it doesn't matter. And quite frankly, the working student is extremely valuable. I would like to share that this position to our industry is an incredibly valuable position. For me, I
It
was
is.
a working student, and immersing, I'd like to talk about that as well, because you've seen
I was
both
one too.
sides, and you were too.
Mhm.
That immersing yourself with horses, it gives you a totally different perspective. Also, it helps you learn hustle, that you care
Yes.
about things a little bit less. You don't, when there's so many things going on, you learn to prioritize, and I think that helps you to ride and become a better instructor and a better trainer.
Okay, so you and I were working students as well, so I'll start with my experience and then I want to hear a little bit about yours. And I'll try to be fairly quick because we could talk probably for hours. So I was a working student at a very similar age to you, kind of that college era. I feel like I got taken advantage of a lot. Like we talked about that earlier, and about, that's one of the major concerns. I loved it. I didn't care I was being taken advantage of, because I literally sun up to sundown horses, loved it. It's what I wanted to do. I was like, I probably should have given myself a cutoff and left the barn. I didn't. I was there in the morning all the way till they finally booted me out. You know what I mean? I loved it. I did anything and everything to be helpful. I just loved it. I looked at it as everything that was going on in the barn was an opportunity for me to tuck that away in my brain and learn to be able to use later. Vet day, farrier day, you name it. They were going to horse shows, whatever. I didn't care. I wanted to experience everything, because every experience is a learning experience to me. So my experience was with an eventing barn. So they not only did the dressage, they did the other phases, which is stadium jumping and of course cross country jumping as well. So they would go away for the 3-day weekends for 3-day events and all that. And so it was a little more rounded. It wasn't just dressage or anything, but I do feel like I should have gotten more lessons and things, but I ended up bringing a horse to board, so that I had to work some of that off. So it was a little different experience, but I too learned more information on feeding, turning out and handling a ton of different horses. And anything from super easy, quiet, dead to the world, safe horses to horses that would come out on their hind legs, you know what I mean? So everything, you learned a lot about loading and unloading trailer horses. I learned about taking care of fencing and all that. So very similar, I think, probably to what you've experienced here. Like I said, I definitely feel like I got taken advantage of, but honestly at the time I didn't care. I really didn't care. I loved it. I wanted to learn and absorb as much as I did, and honestly it helped me so much throughout my horse equestrian career. But yeah, I had a hard time saying no. What about you, Megan? What about your working student experience? How old were you? Were you college age or?
Multiple. So I was 15 for my first one.
Okay.
Went off to California,
Okay.
and it was a group of teenagers that all worked together, and I loved every minute of it.
Was this a school year thing or?
This was a summer.
Oh, it's just a summer.
Just
so
a summer.
You
yeah.
didn't have to change schools. You said you're 15. Okay.
Yeah,
okay,
I was 15.
Keep going.
So it was the summer, and it was great. It was the 5 of us. We ran the barn together. It was the training and the way we were treated was abusive. I got to learn how not to train horses. But my time there I actually loved because of the people. And we need to know how to not to do things, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I came away with that experience knowing this is not how I want, if I have an opportunity, if I have a barn, this is not how I'm going to be treating my working students. So then I went to Temple Farms, and I was there
And that is
in Illinois.
like Chicago, greater Chicago land area, northern Chicago area,
Yep.
northern Illinois.
And so
Very, very well known farm.
very well known. They're not in business anymore, unfortunately. However, I feel I was there at a very special time. Carl Makoko was there, Alf was there.
Alf Hawkinson.
The horses were trained by Spanish riding school riders. It was it was very special. However, it was very sexist. I got to work with stallions. And I had a young rider horse. I also got to meet other young riders. The environment from time to time was toxic. However, the relationships I met there, I still have. Wonderful people. I was able to have amazing experiences riding airs above the ground. But like I said, it was predominantly focused on men. Men accelerated in that environment.
Do you feel that was because of how Temple was, or was that more related to the Spanish riding school influence?
I think Spanish riding school. And I was very fortunate enough to work with George Williams and Roberta. I love both of them. They gave me lots of opportunities. And so I'm very grateful for that time. And then I decided, which I personally don't feel I was ready. I came home quite arrogant and know-it-all, but I think we need that
That's part of the age.
to start a business.
Before you go too far, though, tell us like a typical, because I kind of whipped through the typical days of what I did. What did you do? Like, what was your tasks and duties as a working student at Temple? Were you feeding? Were you cleaning? Were you tacking up for trainers? What were you doing?
It was actually very similar to how I set it up. Because we worked the stallions in the morning. Sometimes we would feed, and I lived in a cabin with two other girls. So much fun. And then it was tacking up. There were two working students for George. I worked for George. And I mean, we're talking 60 horses on this property. There were 5 trainers, a lot going on. So it was the stallions first. It depended on the day. I also had a horse that I brought, but I was very fortunate enough to ride the stallions. I got lunge lessons. That was a kick. I'll tell you about that later. So lunge lessons, riding airs above the ground. I learned my first piaffe, and then in the afternoon was lessons, or George taught lessons. So it was a lot of turning out because the horses didn't get turnout. It was like 45 minutes. So we were 60 horses. We walked a lot.
Yes.
We walked a lot. And so that was pretty much the experience. In the same hours, worked 6 days a week, 1 day off. So that was my experience.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
then I actually, later in life, even after I owned my barn in Wisconsin, I couldn't afford to go to California outright. And so I was able to be a working student in California. I wanted to compete in the CDI series. And so it brought me great joy to brush horses, not be in charge. And
It's nice to not be in charge,
it's
isn't it?
great. I don't know what I was thinking. Honestly, if I could, I would be a working student today. I wouldn't own a farm. I would be a working student just because of the opportunities, the lack of stress, quite simply. And I was always paid. Was it a lot? No. Was I ever going to be a millionaire? No. But it certainly was enough to live on. I didn't have other bills.
Yeah. So in the discussion where I talk about being taken advantage of, I wasn't paid. I got lessons and board. That was it. And I drove quite a bit to get there. But again, like I said, I think I was happily being taken advantage
Yeah.
of. They did help me get, I did end up working in a tack shop nearby, which was a ton of fun because it was more horse stuff and you met more horse people and learned more things. So, and they did help me find other like income jobs, but they couldn't afford that. So like I wasn't necessarily in the barn until like 9 o'clock at night in the summer. I did have like a part-time job to help, pay the bills, but when I wasn't working, I was probably in the barn. But I was a horse crazy teen, so
Yeah.
did you have a stipend? Did you just get the
I had
place
a
to
stipend.
live? You could have
Stipend and a
Did
place
you
to
have to
live.
pay board?
Oh, actually, my very first one, because I was 15, my parents had to pay for my room and board, and I lived with the grandparents of the assistant or the head working student, and so they were pretty much responsible for me. But we were pretty wild, like there wasn't a lot of oversight, and I think that was a great thing that we had the freedom. I mean, we were great kids. Every working student, I joke. I mean, the worst thing we did was ever jump in the pool at Temple Farms.
Right.
Like really.
So at Temple, you said you had a horse with you.
I had a horse.
So did you have to pay board? Was that included in being a working student?
Yep. And honestly, I think it kind of evened out because, and I also went there through my first year of college, so it's all kind of blended.
Oh, sure.
So I had to pay board, but also was paid a stipend, pretty much evened out, right? So yeah.
Sure. So what are your amenities here? Do you live on the farm? Do you commute? And what do you think of that? Whatever it is, tell us all about it.
So what Megan offers here is there's sort of this like apartment studio room in the basement, and then there's a bathroom with a washer and dryer. And so, my commute when I stay here is about a 2-minute walk.
Do you shower in the wash machine?
Oh, there is a so there is a shower,
We
a
give
washing
you a toilet.
Do you have a
Yes,
toilet?
the bathroom. Sorry,
Is there a bucket?
yeah, the bathroom includes a shower, a toilet, a sink to wash my hands,
Mirror? Do you get a mirror?
yeah, it's about that big. There's a mirror.
And you get a closet, a refrigerator.
Yeah, no,
dishes,
it's like a
fully-
studio part. It's like
yeah.
there's a separate bathroom and then like one room to like sort of be able to cook, and there's a refrigerator and your
studio
bed and a
apartment.
desk. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, nice.
yeah,
Okay. And that works really well for you?
yeah, that works well.
Okay. And what you don't have a horse here. Do you get any kind of income? You don't have to be specific, just a yes or a no sign.
Yeah, there's a
don't need
stipend
the
to
details,
cover
it's no one's
food,
business.
and then as I teach lessons, Megan does pay me for teaching
So
lessons.
that I think is huge. I think that's fantastic as a working student program, because back in the day, like, did I teach a little here and there? Yeah, absolutely. And I took, was teaching more later in life and everything. But some places, I think it's a place where people can be taken advantage of. Sometimes in a working student position, they're like, yeah, you teach, but you're not being paid. It's part of your working student. So that's a really interesting thing, and I think it's a benefit. Especially in the economy today, everything's a little expensive, food isn't really cheap. It's great you have an opportunity to make additional income.
And for me as a barn owner, I think what's important is people are paid on performance. I have found people, because it's an internship, there isn't a lot of exchange in money. It's through lessons, and the value, you really can't put a value on the insight of running a barn, why I decide to manage the way I do, right? And I do find working students get resentful because there isn't an exchange. So
Right.
people don't really take into account, you don't have to pay for an apartment. Yes, you're not making millions here. That is totally true.
I
But
don't
you
think
should-
we're making millions in the horse
No.
industry in general. I
We're
think
not,
We're very
but-
fortunate to be
but I
covering
think
costs at some point in
You
time.
should be compensated, but also understand the value is immense. And when I look back on my working student positions, I too took for granted the things that I missed, and learned from my trainers. So I
Right.
think that's a really important aspect that people don't miss, because that lesson, I do take people to horse show. You're not paying for it, and you
Right.
get to use my horses. And I think sometimes people miss the boat in that. So
Yeah.
as a working student, please don't ever miss that boat.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting topic. You'll take your working student, if she wants to go to a horse show, you'll work that out as a plan throughout the show season, but it is your horse.
It is my horse,
And
and
you're
it's
taking
my
them in your trailer
and
and
it's
truck.
my time that I am not getting paid
Yeah.
to invest into my
otherwise-
working student.
Over the weekend, when a horse show is usually over a weekend or a long weekend, normally you're here teaching a lot of lessons.
Yeah, that's it.
And you would be here teaching a lot of lessons. So if you two wanted to go to a horse show, it would be,
It's lots
that's
of
a
money.
long weekend where
Yeah.
you're not getting that income.
Yes,
So
that's correct.
yeah. Okay, so Karen, what about you? Do you want to go to a show? Have you been showing with Megan? Is that an interest to you? Or are you just not interested in that at all? Where are you at?
Personally, I was not interested in doing the showing. I did for a bit of time have a coworker who was kind of like, you're sort of wasting your opportunity here. And that coworker did go with Megan and go to a horse show. And I think there is a lot of value in that. Just for me, the joy that I get out of horses and riding and training, tests in general in my life have always really stressed me out. And for me, part of the reason I wanted to do this was like the love it brought me. And I was like, I think if I go to a horse show, I'm gonna make my life a lot worse this
Sure.
summer. And I chose to instead, maybe in the future do that kind of stuff. But what I got in return for that is Megan went to a ton of horse shows this summer. So I got more barn managing experience, a lot more teaching lesson experience while she was gone, and that experience.
So
And you also got to come to a horse show.
Oh, I did go to one horse show
As a
with
groom.
Megan as a groom. I wasn't in it. And we went for the day. We fed the horses at 4 a.m. and left at 4:30.
It's fun!
It actually was a really enjoyable time, and I got to see what it was like and sort of the difference between what Megan does with a horse at home at her farm and what she does at a show, and it's a completely different kind of thing, the way that you have to prepare. And
absolutely, that's a great experience. But so be honest with me on this question: did she pressure you at all into going to a horse show, or did she just say whatever you want to do?
Not at all.
The reason why I'm asking that is because I think a lot of trainers are like, you have to show. You're here as a working student, and that's
No, I think I told her when I got the job, we had or when she offered me the job, we had a conversation, I said it wasn't really in my goals, and I do not think it was mentioned again until she said she was going to start going to shows in the spring, summertime, and I was like, can I just come watch one? And you were like, yeah. And you never once made me feel at all like I should be or shouldn't be doing anything. You really sort of let me take the lead in what I wanted to do.
Yeah. So I think we need to wrap this series up. About Megan, do you have any more questions?
No, thank you.
Karen, what about you? Is there anything else that you think we missed in this conversation that you want to let the public know?
Yeah. I think that there's a lot of value in doing a working student position, and there's a lot that can be learned, and there are really amazing professionals out there who aren't going to exploit you, and I just hope that becomes more of a thing, and that we can create sort of like better work environments across the board, so that way people can have experiences like these that aren't exploitative, that aren't toxic, because I think at the heart of it, being able to be immersed with the horses taught me so much, not only about horses, but about myself, about confidence, about management, that whether or not I stay in the horse world, I can take with me and learn and sort of apply these skills that I've learned to a lot of other jobs, and that I'm really glad and grateful for this opportunity, and that I did this for a whole year.
One thing I think we very, very briefly went over in part one, before we go, maybe to summarize, can you quickly again say where are the places you looked to find a working student position? We kind of whipped through that, and I think maybe before we go, it would be a really great conclusion. Where are your suggestions on people to go to start looking for these opportunities? Where did you look?
Yeah. So I also want to be clear, this is the only working student position that I've done, and so maybe other people know about other things, but as someone who hadn't been in the horse world and just sort of like lurking from the outside trying to figure out how to get that foot in, I joined a lot of Facebook groups, and I did Yard and Groom, and then I weirdly went through Indeed, and that's where I tried to find reviews of people to see where people were posting about how people were treating them. But I would say Facebook and Yard and Groom is where I was seeing a lot of the stuff.
I think you briefly mentioned Reddit. Was that really more to do research, or was that to actually look for a job?
That was more to do research. I looked up people to try to see if I could see if people had sort of posted positive or negative things, because I like I said, I was kind of scared into it. I was told I was probably just going to cry every day, so I was like, I want to make sure that I was like, I do not think I would have lasted in a place like that, so I wanted to put myself in a place where I thought I had a better chance of succeeding.
Well, and I think Megan and I have been in this industry long enough to know that we know that if anybody's going to do research on us, there's going to be the good, the bad, and the ugly, and I think that's very fair to assume for any, because there's always going to be personality clashes. People are going to come in and be like, this is, you know, there's too
But
much
also,
work.
it's
And
a-
you just got to understand what the job encompasses and how
Yeah.
much physical labor it is. I think you really spoke well on that. But at the end of the day, yeah.
it's a hard job,
It
and
is a
I
hard
think
job.
at the end of the day, it is the working student's responsibility to learn, grow, and push through their insecurities, their weaknesses, and if you pick the right working student position. quite
I want to
frankly.
say one thing though, but for me to say to you as the person who's offering the position, or anybody out there who's considering offering this, you need to know exactly what you expect these people to do, and as they're going through the interview process, you need to make sure that you are telling them the expectations of the job so that they have a fair understanding of how much or how little what is going to be expected of them. Because I think part of the things that have happened to other people, and we talked about people being taken advantage, is, you know, like if you don't explain how maybe labor intensive or whatever the work is going to be, people can come here and within 2 weeks be like, whoa, you know what I mean? Or come to a job, and if they haven't been told exactly what is going to entail, it's not fair. So, you know, have a good job description, I think would be the easy way to summarize that. Do you think that's fair? And do you think that's fair, Karen?
Yes and no. I do think a lot of times, because I've been a working student and a barn owner, that people don't take responsibility of what
True.
they're not capable of.
Right.
Right? And if you find yourself in a bad situation, leave. No one is holding you there.
Yeah.
So I also think that's the working student's responsibility. However, yes, I have created binders. I also ask people to shadow the previous working student before they even come. So I do make an effort to really explain what is the requirements. Obviously, no one ever knows until they're in it. But
Right.
yeah. And
What about you? Any thoughts on that?
I think people can say things, people can put out ads, but you just got to go try it. When I came out here, I wasn't in this area, and I sort of was like, you know what, I'm going to try for the job. Megan said I could come, and I was like, we're going to do a week, and we're going to see, you know, what it is like at the end of it. Is it what I thought it was going to be? In some ways it wasn't, right? Like I wasn't involved in the horse industry. I didn't understand like just how much literal walking the job entailed. And I think most people who start jobs like this, the first week you're like, oh my God, what's happened to my feet?
Many times.
Yep. And so I think you just have to go to a place, and like Megan said, you know, what if this had turned out to be a really exploitative environment? It would have been on me after that first week to leave, and then to decide whether or not I wanted to try again. And I think, you know, there are places out there. I found Megan. This was an amazing experience. There are places out there where you can do this, and I think it is the barn owner's responsibility to make those places, but it's the working students' persons to you know, choose whether or not they want to stay at a place, because nobody wants to be at a toxic environment. And that you just have to go try it. Like go don't be afraid to fail, because you got to fail at certain things.
True that.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I
Right.
think this has been pretty great.
It's
Anything
been
else?
wonderful. Thank you, Karen.
Thanks,
Yeah.
everybody.
Thank
you
you
guys.
for sharing
Yeah.
your honest experience here. It's very important to me. It's been wonderful to have you. I so appreciate you.
I
Yeah.
appreciate the opportunity. So thank
Yeah.
you.
Thank you.
We appreciate it so much. So let us know, you guys, if you got questions. We'll do our best to answer them. But yeah, I guess this is a wrap up of a really great several part
Yeah.
video, and I hope you guys find it as educational as we were hoping that it will be. So
Yeah.
we appreciate it so much. Leave us a comment. Don't forget to the subscribe button. And we will see y'all in our next video. Wave goodbye.
Bye, guys.
everybody.
Thank you.